Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Erik Johansson, and joining me is LSAT Demon student Bianca, who just crushed the LSAT. Bianca, great to have you on. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Erik. I'm really excited to be here.
You are a longtime podcast listener, right? So this is now your moment to shine and inspire the podcast listeners to follow.
Yes, I have to admit, I'm a little starstruck, but I will keep it together.
Okay. Glad. Well, it's really the pleasure is all mine. This is, like I say often, my favorite part of my job is getting to let people like yourself brag about your LSAT journey. So why don't we start at the beginning? Do you remember your start to your LSAT journey? Was there a diagnostic test? Was there a place that you started prepping? How did this all start?
Yeah, so about a year ago, last summer of 2023, I had just been recovering from an injury. So I said, let me start dabbling into the LSAT. Let me see what it's about. I took an untimed diagnostic, really random. That's all I have. It was a 150 flat. So I could imagine it would only probably be worse with time. And I pretty much gravitated toward the Demon right away. I had Googled LSAT score calculator and then the scholarship estimator, and the LSAT Demon tools jumped out at me right away. I thought they were phenomenal. So I was like, let me see what this company has in terms of test prep. So I started dabbling a little bit with the free version, but I didn't really get into things, I would say, until January of 2024. And then I had signed up for the April LSAT actually, and don't know why I did that. Wasn't listening to the podcast yet then, and I canceled it last second, knowing I wasn't ready. Signed up for June, thinking, oh my God, I need to take June. The logic games are going away. I got a 163 in June, which I wasn't happy about. I felt all the pressure from trying to nail it and do it on the first time.
Sure.
And then in August, I finally scored a 174, which this was when I kind of took the pressure off, and that worked wonders.
So you felt a huge difference between that June test where you were saying, oh, this has got to be the one. This is make or break. And then what, by August, were you open to taking the test even more times if you needed to?
Yeah, so actually what changed was that after I got my June score back, I sat down with myself and I was like, okay, now the pressure's on if I really want to apply this cycle. And I knew that was bad. So I sat down with my mom, who is very traditional when it comes to education, and gap years are just a foreign concept, especially for her generation. And I said, Mom, I need to let go of the idea of going to school, law school next year. I need to be open-minded to maybe working a year or two. I'm graduating with a finance degree from a pretty great business school. I'd love to work down here while my friends are still down here. It would be a great experience no matter what. I tried to make it a positive thing and not say, oh my gosh, my plan is ruined. This has to happen. So once I allowed myself to be open to different opportunities, it came to me, and I am putting myself through law school. I knew that ultimately it's my decision. I let go of what anybody else was telling me, other than really the Demon or any mentors I really valued. So that's when I said, I'm going to sit and take August because my practice scores indicated I was ready. But if it doesn't work out, maybe I'll take September, but I'm going to prepare for next cycle, especially to get all my materials in place.
That's great. And it did work out. You got a 174, jumping up from a 163 on your previous test. It sounds like, ironically, giving up on the idea of applying this cycle is what got you the score in time to apply this cycle, because it just took the pressure off.
Yeah, definitely. And I really don't know how I would have done it otherwise. I walked into test day. I had a herniated disc in my back from the day before that at the gym. And that actually kind of distracted me in a weird way, where I said, you know what, this test is mind over matter. I have to just focus, not only because of the physical pain that I was in that moment, but because I knew what it was like to take an LSAT and fail. I thought that was my version of failing, was
Mm.
not scoring where I really wanted to be. I felt that disappointment already once from opening up my score and just having the worst sinking feeling. So I let that anxiety and pressure go for the sake of me having that yay moment, or worst case scenario, working for a year and applying next cycle.
It's good that you mentioned the worst case scenario, because really that's not such a worst case scenario. I had a student in a class recently ask about dealing with anxiety and strategies for coping with test anxiety. And one of the things is admitting to yourself what the worst case scenario actually is. Ironically, imagining, okay, what's the worst that could possibly happen? And when you confront that, you realize, well, actually, it's not that bad. I work for another year. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I really had this pressure in the beginning of saying, okay, I'm graduating. I have to go right in. This is what I want to do. And although I'm set on going to law school and becoming an attorney, which I'm very convinced that is what I'm meant to do, I still needed to be open-minded to giving myself the time that was required. I knew that I didn't want to rush into law school with a subpar LSAT and not, be in the best position possible. I wanted to be in a position to get merit money. I knew I'm putting myself through it. So I really want to set myself up for the best possible outcomes, and really accepting, like you said, the worst case scenario was not so bad after all. I
Mm.
could work for a year in an industry maybe I don't know much about, or explore other interests. So it really was a win-win situation. And I think a lot more people should be open-minded to that, especially if you come from a family that's very go, 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 high achievers. It's
Mm.
okay to take a step back and do what's best for you.
Yeah, you mentioned you had to have a conversation with your mom and that she's very traditional, and it would have been a leap for her to accept this idea of a gap year. Sounds like you had a productive conversation. Did she come around to your way of seeing things?
Absolutely. And I think it was really helpful for me to talk it out and convince her about it. It almost convinced myself as well. I said, listen, mom, I know I wanted to go to law school this coming cycle, but think about it. If I am not in the best possible place, if my LSAT's not as high as it could be, then is it really worth rushing? I'm so young. I'm coming straight out of college. There's so much time, and I explained to her, I am in a major city right now. I have networked. I have put myself in a great position to go into maybe a more financial or business oriented role at first. And I just kind of talked with her through the possibilities. And she said that, she took a little bit to think about it, but she said, you know what, Bianca, I think this is a great idea. I think that you know best. She kind of put the trust in me because I had become so educated. So it was a really great conversation, especially since I didn't let that be a possibility before. I was like, no, I can't tell my parents that I'm thinking about taking a year. I can't do that. But once I did, it took that burden or shame that I somehow developed off, and it made it a much more pleasant experience.
Great. Now, I don't want to attribute your success to your herniated disc, and I would not wish that upon anyone. Sounds terrible. But it is funny that you mentioned it was almost like a distraction. I've heard similar things from athletes who have said that having just a minor injury or some little tweak actually can give their mind like some sort of focus point where they have something to overcome in a productive way. So that's interesting. I'd never thought of that before. But
It
yeah.
was funny. The day before, I was such a mess. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. I catastrophized. I had my moment to really let it out. I rested the whole day. I was iced. I could barely take a step without
Oh,
excruciating pain.
oh,
And especially when it's acute and it's so fresh. And, at night, I just said, okay, this is go time. I need my 8 hours of sleep. I kind of turned on like a robot, and, I had that back binder on when I walked into the exam, and it was great. It was almost like a distraction. I took care of myself. I Yeah, I just felt empowered, like you said, that I had something to overcome, something that was thrown my way. It just increased my motivation. So there's definitely
Nice.
positives to every situation.
That's great. Was there anything else about that testing experience that was different? So you felt less pressure, you had a thing to overcome that maybe sharpened you a little bit. Anything else you can think of that helped things go well on that later test?
I do think that I had momentum as I started my test. I was doing very well in my practice test before. I was scoring in the 170s, sometimes high 170s, sometimes low 170s. I knew what I was capable of. So having that security was great. I think in June, maybe I had scored in the 170s on some practice tests, but the majority was in the 160s. And
Yeah.
I wanted to be selective with my data points and think that I was going to score in the 170s, which your practice tests don't lie, as we've heard many times, and they certainly didn't then.
Hmm.
And they did not on the second either. So when I went in this time, I had LR first, and I was pretty sure that it had to be a perfect section at first. I had never gotten a perfect LR, which was weird. Even scoring highly, I never got a perfect LR. And I felt really amped up in that moment because I went over every question. I didn't have much more to review at a weird, point. It was strange, but I was happy to have that momentum in the beginning and get excited. And I think that's just a luck thing that may happen to some people. Obviously, there's an element of luck in this test,
Sure.
but the hard work that I did prior to be able to feel confident while I was taking it really helped. And overall, I had a great test experience. I actually went in person, which is atypical because I probably would have thought I should stay home given I don't want to throw off anything or do anything abnormal on test day. But for me, it was a very pleasant experience at Prometric. It was me and one other student in this really large room, so I don't
Oh,
really
nice.
know why, but very peaceful, no disruptions. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, great to hear that you had that good in-person test experience. I think what's going to work best for everybody differs. I was very glad I was able to take it from home. I had success at home. Sounds like in-person worked well for you. I think like your herniated disc, ultimately we want it to be something that doesn't matter, that it's secondary to doing the work of the test itself. Cool. You mentioned the hard work that you fell back on. You went into that August test knowing, hey, my practice test scores are there. I've done the hard work to set myself up for success. When you reflect on that work, is there anything that sticks out in particular? Any big lessons that you had to learn along the journey of your LSAT prep that got you from that place of, oh, you can't maybe 170 to, yes, I am a 170 plus scorer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there were countless lessons. I think the LSAT journey time period is a great way to grow as a human being and learn from many, many mistakes and lessons. The one lesson that I learned over time was less is more sometimes when it comes to prep. In the beginning, I was just churning out hours and hours and hours of poor quality prep. And I wasn't taking the time necessary to review. I was drilling way too quickly without really sitting with the wrong and the right answers. And toward the end, I was doing way less questions, really getting into the mistakes to a point where I could reteach them to someone else. I felt that that was much more of a bang for my buck because at the end of the day, it's the same lessons you're learning from all this prep. What's a necessary assumption? What's a sufficient assumption? It's just you're seeing the same things over and over again, that it only takes a few times of really sitting with an incorrect question to understand it. So that was a major lesson for me, is that less is more. I loved the gratification of submitting a test or a time section and seeing a score. I think
Mm,
everybody likes that, but you have to let that go and just do high quality work.
yeah, definitely. You were a podcast listener as well. Is there any advice that you heard on the podcast that you wish you had implemented sooner than you did?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that something a lot of podcast listeners don't want to come to terms with is just focusing on accuracy and letting go of finishing the section. I just always somehow wanted to finish the section no matter what. Even if I was on question 20, everything is going well. Nope, I had to rush through in the last 5 minutes and answer every question, and it never worked out. It never magically works out. So early on in my prep, I think I would have hit less roadblocks had I just focused on accuracy and turned off that clock. I really stopped paying attention to the clock late in my process. And I don't know why I was so obsessed with it before. It only distracted me. So I think if I could advise any listeners now, it would say to let go of that obsession with finishing sections. There was someone on the podcast I think you had spoken with who got a high 170 score without finishing, and that really stuck with me. He like didn't finish a reading passage or something, and I was like, oh my gosh, how could he not finish? But then he had like a 178 or something. So I think people should be more open-minded to that. It's definitely foreign, so I understand that. We're always told to finish your work, finish the test. So that's something that I think would have really helped me through any plateaus.
Great. Love to hear that that lesson did land eventually. I know it's one thing to hear it and one thing to even believe that that's what you should do, but another thing to give up on the idea of finishing, because I think it's wrapped up in our ego a little bit, in how we feel about who we are as a test taker. Oh, if I'm not finishing these sections, can I really say that I'm good at this test? Yeah, you can, if you're careful and if you're accurate. You can definitely score highly without finishing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Bianca, thank you so much. This has been a real treat to have you on. Is there any final piece of advice that you would give to our listeners? Maybe someone who is in the same shoes that you were months ago, staring down a test that they aren't sure that they're ready for?
Yeah, I would just say don't sign up until you're ready. You'll know when you're ready. Make sure you're doing high quality prep. At the end, I was doing one high quality hour a day while I interned full time for a law firm in the summer. So that one high quality hour worked wonders compared to the multiple hours of just tiring myself out. So take care of yourself, get your sleep, move your body, eat well, and it'll all work out.
Great. Thanks so much, Bianca.
Thank you, Erik.
All right. Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.